One place that could deal with some dangerous surf and rip current conditions along the coastal flooding is Atlantic Beach, North Carolina. Now, let's go to Mike Seidel, boots on the ground this morning. Mike, how are conditions at this point? And we know they're only going to get worse over the next several hours.
Yeah, so far it's pretty moderate here. We have some light rain coming in. Let's go to the radar first. We'll show you what's coming at us. The big slug of rain Jim mentioned. I think it's going to be another couple of hours before we get the steady light to moderate rainfall, and then the heavier rain comes in later today and tonight. We're expecting 3 to 5 inches of rain. This is going to be an impact certainly inland. We have flood watches up for a good deal of eastern North Carolina, extending up the eastern seaboard. These kick in and go through Saturday, although I think most of the rain here in Atlantic Beach is going to shut down once the center comes in. It's expected to come in tomorrow morning after sunrise. Does it come in a little east of us, a little west of us? Well, we'll figure it out, but the bottom line is the worst of the weather will come in overnight tonight and Saturday morning. Then the winds will go offshore, and the key here is when are the high tides? High tide here is a little after 2 today. And then again, tomorrow afternoon, we have a high tide at about 2:30 p.m. So the landfall, or whatever it is, if it's a PTC or if it's Ophelia, will come in between the high tides. So that will save us a little bit. We're expecting a surge of 2 to 4 feet above normally high ground. Right here, we're under a storm surge watch, not a warning at this point. There's the Atlantic, not looking too churned up or angry yet. We've got, I don't know, maybe 2 to 3 footers. Water temperature is still nice and warm in the low 80s as things have not cooled down just yet. So we're going to be watching the increasing threat for flash flooding inland, heavy rainfall. Winds could gust later tonight and tomorrow as much as 50+ miles an hour. So we'll see if we get some power outages. And then the thing will come in, Reynolds, tomorrow morning. Once it moves in, a quick turn to the west-southwest, the winds blow offshore, and we can actually see the rain come to an end and maybe get a bit of a dry slide in here and maybe some sunshine. But it's going to be out of here by late morning, and then we'll just deal with the gusty winds through the rest of the day as that slug of rain moves north into the mid-Atlantic. Reynolds?
All right, excellent reporting as always from Mike Seidel. So one place that could deal with some dangerous surf and rip current conditions along with coastal flooding is Atlantic Beach, North Carolina. And that's where we find meteorologist Mike Seidel this morning. Mike, how are conditions at this moment?
Well, so far so good, but we're just beginning to ramp up. We've got some light rain. The winds are running northeast at about 10 to 15 miles an hour. Out at Cape Lookout, they've had gusts over 40 miles an hour so far. Here's the surf. Not looking too dangerous right now, but we've got the rip current issue through tomorrow, maybe into Sunday, and the tide's going to come back in this afternoon. Now, fortunately, landfall, or when the center moves on shore tomorrow morning, is going to be between the two high tides. The high tide tomorrow afternoon is about 2:30 p.m., so that's going to help us out. We're actually here in this part of North Carolina because we're south of Duck. We're in a storm surge watch down to Surf City. The expected values 2 to 4 feet above normally high ground, but you can see we have a nice wide beach. There's the dune, nice high dune here as we look towards Pine Knoll Shores from here at Atlantic Beach. So I don't think there's going to be any issue at all about any water getting into any property here on these beaches here in this part of North Carolina. Let's show you Ocracoke, the island north of here. Now their elevation, 4 or 5 feet. This is the harbor shot this morning, and the harbor is protected from the waves. In fact, I was looking at this with Lee, went by last week or so, and it never looked that frothy there in the harbor, but you get a sense of how calm it is right now. But again, we're going to watch to see that water get pushed in towards those areas, the Outer Banks in those areas, because the center is going to come up near here and then come in tomorrow morning. So they're going to have that push of water from the east and northeast. And eventually here, as the storm comes in, the winds go west-southwest, and that'll act to push the water out. So again, if we're going to have any impacts from the surge zone and from the surf and tides higher than average, it's going to be before landfall. After that, all bets are off. Rainfall inland, 3 to 5 inches. We've got flood watches up through tomorrow evening. So even inland, we're going to have the flood watches, and those tropical storm warnings do extend inland from North Carolina all the way up into Virginia, all the way up to the lower eastern shore of Maryland and across the bay. So issues there. We'll see how high the water gets pushed up the Potomac and up the Severn in those areas in D.C. and also around Ego Harbor in Annapolis. Continuing coverage throughout the day and through late tonight right here on the Weather Channel.
One place that could definitely deal with the dangerous surf and rip current conditions along with some coastal flooding is Atlantic Beach, North Carolina. That's where we find the man, Mike Seidel, meteorologist Mike Seidel to be exact. Mike, lead us through this morning.
Good morning, Reynolds. And Jim brought up a good point, and we've been mentioning that this morning. Tomorrow, once the center comes on shore, that may be it for the rainfall in this area because it's certainly not concentric. The other question is, how fast does it tighten up? How strong does it get? Right now, the Hurricane Center forecasting a 60-mile-an-hour storm, subtropical storm. Does it get a name? We're still waiting on that. Probably will get a name sometime early this afternoon once the plane gets in. Here at Atlantic Beach, we're waiting and watching. The red flags are flying on the beaches today, and they'll be flying tomorrow. Of course, tomorrow, the wind will be blowing offshore by about late morning. Surf right now, it's slowly ramping up. We're not talking 7-8 footers right now. These are generally about 2 to 3 footers rolling in. This is where high tide was overnight. Now, they have lost some sand. I can see looking up and down the beach, they have lost some sand. They've taken a pretty good beating. Now, they didn't get direct impacts from Lee, but if you watch the surf cams over the weekend, last weekend, I mean, they had big waves, and they did have enough action to take some of the sand out. So we will have some erosion. Now, inland, the concern, wind and rain, because the tropical storm warnings do extend inland, not only here, but up through Virginia and Maryland and over towards the western side of the Chesapeake Bay. So potential, some power outages. Watch the flash flooding. I think the worst driving weather here is going to be later today through tomorrow morning. And then once the center goes in, that may, as I mentioned, completely shut down the rainfall. But the storm surge watch is up for this area of North Carolina, from Duck down to Surf City, and the potential for 2 to 3 feet of water above normally high ground. High tides coming in about 2 a.m. and then about 2:30 p.m. tomorrow, Reynolds. The center comes on shore in between the high tides. That's going to help us out. But then on this part of the coast, it's an east-west beach. So the northeast wind this morning is an offshore wind. And then tomorrow, once the center goes by, it'll be more of an onshore component coming in from the south and southwest and west-southwest. So a lot to kind of take in here and watch and see how it all pans out. But the bottom line is it is going to be zero kind of beach day today, tomorrow. Sunday, the sun will be back out, but we may still have some rip current issues here on the North Carolina coast. Reynolds?
All right. Thanks so much, Mike Seidel. It's a story about movement. It's a story about a lot of things rising and falling. That's right. One place that could deal with some dangerous surf and rip current conditions along, with coastal flooding is Atlantic Beach in North Carolina. That's where we find meteorologist Mike Seidel this morning. Mike, how are conditions at this hour?
Things are slowly ramping up. The rain is coming down a little bit harder. Let's go to the radar first. You can see the big swath that's rotating in. This is lopsided, so a lot of the heavy rain is on the north side and the west side, and it's coming right in at us. So we're going to have heavier rain in the next half an hour or so, and it's going to continue to rain through the afternoon. The flood watch, especially for the inland areas, that's up until tomorrow evening. Here's the surf here at Atlantic Beach. Not looking too frothy. These are 2 to 3 footers. This is where high tide was. Low tide's coming up here in the next 4 hours. Then the water will come back in. Next high tide coming up this afternoon, mid-afternoon. But I want to show you the camera from Avon, the Avon Pier in North Carolina. And look at the difference. This coast is a north-south coast on Hatteras, this part of Hatteras. And look at the difference in the surf and the waves and just the how churned up it is. And this is what we saw last weekend, although not as churned up when Lee came by. Boy, they had big waves out there. I mean, it was a surfer's delight from the Carolinas all the way up to New Jersey last weekend. So we've got the wave action here. We've got the surf advisory, heavy surf advisory, also that risk of some storm surge here, up to 2 to 4 feet above the normally dry ground. It's a watch right now. It's not a warning. The warning is from Duck up to Chincoteague, Virginia. We'll see if they extend that farther north through the Maryland and Delaware coast. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't do that. Meanwhile, here we've got a big wide beach. Winds peaking 50 to 60 mile an hour gusts, so we should have some power outages around the area and the inland flood risk with the heavy rainfall of 3 to 5 inches. We'll keep you updated. We're on the air right on through late tonight from the Carolinas and Virginia. Stay with us here on the Weather Channel throughout the morning.
Seidel is on the ground there in Atlantic Beach, North Carolina, with a bit of a look at the current conditions. Mike, how's it feeling out there?
Oh, so far so good, but we've got a long way to go, Alex. We're on a nice wide beach, I can tell you that. That's really going to help the property here. No concern of any of the Atlantic getting into any of these buildings. Look how wide the beach is. And, you know, high tide was right there. And we've got a big dune out here. This dune must go up about 15 feet. This is very well protected. What you will notice in the background is we've got the red flag flying. There it is, kind of stuck to the pole there, and for good reason, because of the rip current issue, the dangerous surf, right on through tomorrow, and maybe the rip current issue continues into Sunday as the sun comes back out. Also, we will get some beach erosion. We've had some. Now, we had some last weekend from Lee, although we didn't have the wind. We had those big breakers coming in. As I walk down here, we have lost some sand. Not a deep cut, but this is where high tide was earlier this morning before sunrise. Now, the high tide of concern really will be tomorrow afternoon, even after the storm goes by right here, because the winds are going to go west-southwest. This is an east-west beach, so you do the math. West-southwest is going to be more of an onshore flow. Right now, the winds are northeast offshore, and nearby Beaufort, 18 miles an hour, gusting to about 25 miles an hour. So we have a long way to go as far as the winds ramping up. Heavy rainfall. We've got the flood watches up through Saturday evening, again in the inland areas where you're going to have upwards of 3 to 5 inches of rainfall as the moisture comes in. You can see on the radar right now where the heavy rain is, Jen, coming right at us. We'll see if we can get some squally weather, but this is certainly a system that doesn't have the typical tropical squalls that come in and the winds just start howling. You know, you've been through that many times before. But we will get some very heavy rain as we go through the afternoon and evening tonight. We'll see what happens tomorrow after it makes landfall, if it all just moves quickly out of the area and up to the north. Jen?
Yeah, no, Mike, thank you. It's kind of a chillier rain, too, not your typical sort of warm tropical system out there. We'll be checking back in with Mike.
One of the spots that is anticipating to feel some of the impacts from this thing is in Atlantic Beach, North Carolina. That's where we find our very own Mike Seidel. And, Mike, when you look at how things are faring right now, gray skies, you've seen some occasional rain showers out there. Are people getting into the waters? Is that even something that's possible? What color flag is flying?
Red flags are flying with good reason. We've got the rip current issue, the high surf, the dangerous breakers. But, of course, when you've got an offshore wind, it cleans up the sets, and we've got some surfers. This guy just came in. The other one, the other gentleman out there just had a nice ride. He was up on the board for about 25 or 30 seconds. Not too shabby. I mean, this isn't the pipeline. This is Atlantic Beach, North Carolina. Nice, beautiful, wide beach. Wind is starting to gust a little bit more, 25 miles an hour plus. Rain is coming down harder as expected. You can see that on the radar. It's all moving in across the Gulf Stream in the Atlantic into these coastal communities of North Carolina, including the Outer Banks all the way down towards Wilmington. But we've got a big dune out here. Runs about 12 to 15 feet, a nice wide beach. So really no concern, even with the storm surge watch and potentially a 2 to 4 foot surge, of any water getting into any of the properties here. The main concern would be how much impact we have on the beaches as far as beach erosion. Also, inland, the flood watches are up. 3 to 5 inches of rain, maybe more, as the center comes on shore and moves north. We'll see that rain likely come to a very quick end. In fact, based on the latest high-res radar forecast, we may get a break in the rainfall later this evening and overnight. We'll just see how that shakes out, because the system is, you know, it's not concentric. It's off kilter as far as where the rain and convection are. And we'll find out what happens coming up at 11 o'clock from the Hurricane Center. The plane goes in early this afternoon. At that point, we may have a designated subtropical storm, and it could be either Ophelia or Philip. We'll have to wait and see. Stay with the Weather Channel, continuing coverage through late tonight here on this PTC number 16.
Meteorologist Mike Seidel is on the ground there in Atlantic Beach, North Carolina, with a bit of a look at the current conditions. Mike, a little bit of a breeze, skies are gray, the waters are looking pretty choppy. Not the best of beach days, that's for sure.
Yes, and things are ramping up. The wave heights have increased. I can notice that, and they're breaking farther out. These are nice, clean sets. As the wind is blowing offshore with this east-west beach here, the northeast wind, we've gusted 20 to 25 miles an hour at nearby Beaufort. But look at the sets, and you can see the wind blowing offshore, and you can see the spray coming off the top of the sets. this is great for surfing, and we had a couple surfers out here earlier. Take a look at this. Rodney Hall catching this gentleman, nice guy I talked to earlier, who caught this wave and rode it for as long as he could, and it was a nice ride. I caught a couple of two for social, and just a pleasant day out there. And you know, these guys are used to surf and the rip currents, and they were out there for about a half an hour or so and have caught it a day. I don't know if they had to go to work or not, but there you go. So that's one benefit of an offshore wind with this surf up, and the surf will get higher as we get towards later tonight and tomorrow morning as the winds increase from the northeast. But then once the storm goes by, the winds will go offshore. In fact, they were telling me they can't wait until Sunday up at Point Lookout because the winds are going to be going offshore. And they're going to be going offshore here by mid to late tomorrow morning. And that may be, I should say, when I say offshore, I mean for most of the coast. This coast is east-west, so let me back up here. Here, with a west-southwest wind on the backside of the system, we're going to have an onshore wind. High tide's about 2:30. We'll see how that works out. Right now we're under a storm surge watch, 2 to 4 feet, but that's not going to have any impact on any of this area within eyesight. Huge dune line, wide beach, no worries. The worries are the inland flooding risk, the coastal flooding north of here, especially on the sound sides, Pamlico and Albemarle Sounds, depending on what time of the day, what the wind direction is. And also we have the flood watch inland, so watch out for standing water and some urban flooding, especially later today and tonight as the rain starts to add up. So Jen, right now, light to moderate rainfall, gusty winds 20 to 25 miles an hour, and some vivacious surf here in Atlantic Beach. And by the way, you were just here, what, 2 weeks ago for Dahlia.
Yeah, no, same spot, Mike, here. I know that area well, and I appreciate that big wide beach because I know that will help protect them up in the big dunes that they've left alone as well, which is incredibly key when it comes to protecting our coastline. All right, Mike, thank you. We'll be back checking in with you, and that includes down in Atlantic Beach where we find meteorologist Mike Seidel. And Mike, they call that area the Crystal Coast because that water can get quite clear, but not today.
No, not today. It's churned up, but it's not bathtub washing machine lake like you see now up at the Outer Banks because of the configuration of the coast here versus what we're seeing up there like at Avon and Manteo and up towards Nag's Head and Kitty Hawk. Right here, it's an east-west coast, so the wind, the northeast wind, which, by the way, over at Smithfield just gusted to 40 miles an hour, so it is picking up here at the beach. It's blowing offshore with this configuration, so it's cleaning up the sets. We had some surfers earlier enjoying the nice clean sets. The tide is obviously going out. High tide this morning earlier was right about here, and I suspect the tide will be higher certainly tonight, later today, sorry, and then tonight about 2 a.m. and then also tomorrow afternoon. Now, tomorrow afternoon, the wind will be blowing onshore from the west-southwest. So that would, you know, theoretically would push the water towards the beach. But I don't think we have any worries here, any concern about any impact on the property. This beach is super wide. They've got a dune here that goes up about 10 to 15 feet. And so that is really not a concern with this particular system. You can see the red flag blowing there on the beach. Because of the rip current issue, the dangerous breakers, that'll continue through tomorrow, as well as the flood watch. Inland areas, watch out for 3 to 5 inches of rain. Right now, it's raining at about 1/3 of an inch an hour, based on what we've seen nearby at the airport measurements in the past 20 minutes. So that's what we're dealing with right now. Not particularly heavy, but it slowly adds up. We will keep you updated from Atlantic Beach. Justin Michaels here later this afternoon. And Paul Goodlow will check in from the Tidewater of Virginia. And we are live on the Weather Channel tonight until 1 a.m. Eastern.